Tom English at BBC Scotland is with us. Tom, how are you getting on?
I'm very well. Yourself?
Yeah, look, I don't know whether that ex-Celtic player that was talking to Pat on the way out of Parkhead at the weekend was maybe just engrossed in the win against Rangers and possibly over-exaggerating, but how good is this Celtic team?
Domestically, they're outstanding. They're great fun to watch, and they've been created in a relative blink of an eye by Ange Postecoglou. He inherited a fairly chaotic club and rebuilt the team, rebuilt the atmosphere, rebuilt the relationship between the club and the fans, and he's done an extraordinary job. They're a very, very entertaining team. They're young, they're ambitious, they're creative, they're quick, and they're pretty lethal up front. But the ultimate test comes now. They've shown that they are miles ahead on Saturday's evidence of anything in Scotland. We thought after they've routed opposition that you'd expect them to rout, in the Scottish Premiership this season, we thought that the Rangers game would be a test, a battle of more or less equals. No, not a chance. They destroyed Rangers. And yeah, look, I'm not saying that I wouldn't say that they're the best since the Lisbon Lions. Frankly, I wouldn't know. But in the here and now, they are massively, massively entertaining.
Do they even compare favourably, say, if we're to look at the more recent history, to maybe some of the teams that Brendan Rodgers would have had, who also played very entertaining football a few years ago while they were on the run to what would ultimately stop at 9 in a row, or even thinking back maybe to the team of about 20 years ago with Henrik Larsson at his pomp? Do they compare favourably to that?
I'd say it's very early days, but I'd say they have absolutely got the capacity to get to that level. Some Celtic fans will possibly say that they're already there. Some say they have a way to go. I'm not sure anyone will ever get to the kind of iconic status of Henrik Larsson, but you never know. One of the greatest players ever to put on a Celtic jersey, truly world class. But Rodgers' team, yeah. I mean, the Rodgers team really was the first season, the invincible season, was the best of the Rodgers team. They were very good, way too good for everybody else in Scotland. In the subsequent seasons that Rodgers was in charge, but his first season they were exceptionally good. From what I've seen of this Celtic team this season, they've hit marks that the Rodgers team hit. They've hit the heights. When you talk about Abada and Kyogo and Jota, they have done things that Dembele and Scott Sinclair and James Forrest, those kind of guys did. The atmosphere at the stadium is the same as it was under Rodgers in that first season, i.e. fans thoroughly enthralled to the football that they were watching and the manager who was delivering it. Postecoglou walks on water at Celtic Park. The man is, he's a kind of deified figure now, and I get it. I really do get it.
Yeah, because there was, let's say, plenty of cynicism, Tom, when he first came in. This idea of a guy of Greek descent who had, managed in Asia, was from Australia. He was coming in, didn't even have the correct licence to manage in Scotland when he was initially going to come in, and all that conversation about whether this was Celtic rolling the dice a little bit too much. But it would seem over the last 18 months or so since he's been in, it's not just been about the good recruitment, but also really good coaching and a very good tactical approach that has transformed this Celtic team, who looked like they were really flagging towards the end of Lennon's time in charge.
Flagging would be an understatement. They were in really poor order. The fans, that element of the fans were protesting outside the ground. The team came under physical attack after one home game. And it was a real mess. This was a club that was used to success, 9 in a row. They could see the kind of sacred 10 in a row disappearing in front of their eyes, and they didn't like it. And they went after Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe kind of messed them around for quite a while and eventually told them no. And then Postecoglou comes in, and his track record, everyone could see his track record. But everyone thought, if Celtic fans were being honest, a lot of them must have thought, geez, is he going to be good enough? But his first press conference, you thought, okay, hang on, this guy is different. He gets it. He had a command of the room. His message was very clear. He had an authority about him. And then we started to hear stories about what he was like in the training ground, what he was like one-to-one. very impressive. He had a tough start because he needed players in. He had targets. He wasn't getting them in the door fast enough. But when that started to click, he brought in Abada, he brought in Kyogo, he brought in Jota, he brought in Matt O'Reilly, he brought in Juranovic, Carter Vickers, and a bunch of others, Hattati. And one after another have hit the mark. I mean, it's an extraordinary run of success in the transfer market. Celtic sold Odsonne Edouard to Palace and Christopher Ayer to Brentford for a combined 28 or 29 million. Celtic, Postecoglou, has used that money and assigned 8 players for the equivalent sum. Nine of the 11 that started at the weekend in the evisceration of Rangers were Postecoglou signings. 4 of the 5 who came off the bench were Postecoglou signings. So he has done an amazing job in such a quick space of time.
Yeah, because Tom, I actually was going to reference that, the volume of his own players that are already in the team now. And I'm just sort of curious, like, it's been this constant evolution. Like, what is your expectation for this European campaign now? Because you look at the European results last year, and I don't know how high the Europa League and then the Conference League was in their listed priorities, but I mean, it's, February, is it Bodo Glimt sort of turned them over? Yeah. But are we looking at a different team even now compared to sort of February, you know what I mean, in terms of the evolution of that group?
I think we are, yeah. Some of the Japanese lads, Hatate came in, Maeda came in January. The team was still bedding down. Bodo Glimt was really poor. Their European stuff was poor last season. But I think this was a team trying to get used to a new system, a new manager, trying to get used to each other. So what we've seen this season is really, and they won the league. Let's not forget it, they won the league. And were deserving winners of the league. But we've seen since they've come back in, since all these guys have had a proper pre-season, he's added to the squad, they look the real deal domestically. This is the big challenge and the big kind of exciting thing for Celtic fans and for those of us who watch them is how will Postecoglou's style, how will this team that's tearing up the Scottish Premiership fare against the biggest of the big beasts, Real Madrid? No Celtic fan thinks, they're going to blow Real Madrid away. But what they're fascinated is, can this team cause Real Madrid problems? Can Jota and Abada and Kyogo, who will be fit, he was taken off in the first 5 minutes at Celtic Park on Saturday, but he is fit. Can they put a dent in Real Madrid? Where are Celtic at in terms of the truly big picture of the Champions League? And we're going to start finding that out tomorrow night. Even if they lose, and they're obviously huge underdogs, they've got Shakhtar Donetsk and they've got RB Leipzig. I think they'd fancy their chances of maybe second, certainly third. They would look at Shakhtar and Leipzig as beatable.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst draw when you consider there were 4 seeds going into it. There were a lot better teams in the third pot, particularly than Shakhtar, that could have been pulled out. The thing is, Tom, we're talking to Pat Nevin about their approach a little bit earlier on, and he suspects Real Madrid come to Glasgow tomorrow, Celtic will look to impose their style. Sometimes Celtic have kind of sat back against the bigger teams in Europe, but he reckons Ange Postecoglou is very unlikely to change his approach even for Real Madrid tomorrow night.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Pat. Postecoglou is not the type to die wondering. And he would say, I'm going to send my team out there. Why should I change my style of play? Why should I tell them to be more negative? Because then I'll always wonder, well, what if I got them to play their usual style? What might have happened? He's not a what might have been guy. He's going to send them out tomorrow in the way that they normally play. And they're going to try and impose their game on Real Madrid and see if it works. And if it does, then the ground will shake under our feet at Celtic Park. And if it doesn't, well, he'll have learned something. And he's a very good learner, Postecoglou. It wasn't all sweetness and light for him last season, but he learned as he went along. So I think, I think we're going to see Celtic try and play this kind of swashbuckling, pacey, energetic, hard-pressing style against the best and see what happens. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, just in terms of the manager, he just seems to have like a really strong personality. I know you would expect that of like managers at that level, but just with the nature of that role and that job and sort of how demanding it is, like, is that power of the personality, is that what helped to get him through some of those sticky patches last year, that he never seemed, from our sort of external removed view, to be too ruffled at any point? You're covering the beat, maybe he was, but he didn't seem to ever carry himself in a way that wasn't confident.
No, the only time I kind of saw him, and I wouldn't even say rattled, I would say maybe mildly annoyed, was right at the start when he wasn't getting players in with the speed that he wanted them in. And he had a couple of things in the media, a few glancing blows against the board, just basically to say, can you hurry up? You know, that's it. But once he got his players in, I haven't seen this guy ruffled at all. He's got great presence. He's got great authority. Even when his team played disappointingly, he's a great communicator. You know, he exudes kind of, I've got this, you know, in everything. In his press conference, some of the press conferences here can be a little bit testy, but he sails through them, and he has a real authority about him. And you know, you go to press conference and you want to be on your toes when you're talking to Postecoglou, because if you ask a dopey question, you're going to get it, and quite right. Fair enough. That's the game. He's been a breath of fresh air here, and I hope Celtic get a good result, a good performance tomorrow, because I think there is something. My sense of this anyway is that there is something a bit special building here. There's a young team. Postecoglou looks like a man on a mission, and the club is. Neil Lennon, I think, did a terrific job. Brendan Rodgers did a terrific job. They're the ones who did the 9 in a row with Ronnie Dyla as well. They won a ton of trophies, but this fella, he's something a bit different, and I think really, really intriguing character.
Tom, if I could ask you about the hierarchy at the club, because as Dan mentioned a few minutes ago, and you've also alluded to as well, it seems that Postecoglou has been able to bring in players that fit his system. Is it a case of Ange Postecoglou has the final say on signings? Who's making those calls along the way within the club when they dip into the transfer market?
Well, part of the malaise of Celtic at last summer, you know, just after they lost the 10 in a row, was they appointed a chief executive called Dominic Mackay from the Scottish Rugby Union. And he was there for, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks, might not even have been that. And then he disappeared. And, you know, people were saying, what's happened here? It was just a symbolic of the club, directionless. They appointed Michael Nicholson from within. He's a mainstay, a great servant of the club. And he's done a very effective job, very, very quiet, compared to Peter Lawwell, who was basically, you know, he was a previous chief executive. He's been there knocking on for 20 years. He controlled everything about the club. Nicholson has been a lot quieter, and I suspect his relationship with Postecoglou is really, really good. Postecoglou identifies the players. Nicholson has done a terrific job in going out and getting them, spending the money, but spending it wisely. Celtic had become very, very scattergun in the way they spent. They brought in all sorts of players for all sorts of money, and it flushed it down the toilet effectively in that last year, 18 months, as they tried to get the 10 in a row. So Nicholson is a kind of very quiet but effective character in this whole Celtic kind of renaissance. But Postecoglou is the man. I mean, you know, the fans worship him. It's mad. You have to kind of see it to believe it. But if Postecoglou asked players or fans to run through a wall, they wouldn't ask why. They just do it.
Yeah, because I kind of felt that Celtic bought very poorly at a time, particularly when Rangers went down the leagues. It was almost like Celtic decided they were going to sign players from, you know, rival clubs within the Scottish Premiership, and it was like things kind of didn't kick on when Rangers weren't in the top flight. I don't know if that's a fair analysis, but I felt like they bought very poorly at a time when Rangers were outside the Scottish top flight.
Well, they did and they didn't. You know, they bought some good players around that time, and they sold them on for a lot of money. And when their recruitment was good, i.e., say Van Dijk, Wanyama going back a bit further, Ki Sung Young, who they sold for six million. There was Kieran Tierney, who was one of their own, who was a kid at the club. You know, when they were good, they were very good. And they were very good for a long time in their recruitment. And it was like buy low, sell high. Excellent. Made a lot of profit. But somewhere along the line, they kind of fell asleep at the wheel on that front. They started spending money, 4.5 million on Albion Ayeti from West Ham, 3.5 million on Patrick Klimala, 2 strikers. No good. Shane Duffy, it was just the wrong man, wrong city, wrong club. Good player, was a nightmare here. Vasilis Barkas, the Greek goalkeeper, spent 5 million on him, could hardly make a save. So it was a lot of loan signings didn't work out. There was a kind of temporary nature leading into what should have been the 10 in a row in the Celtics fans' eyes, but they didn't get there. And Postecoglou came in, he had to clear out some dead wood, and he had a whole team to sign. Not a whole team, a whole squad actually. And it's remarkable. And this is the thing that everyone says about him. He's hardly signed a poor player. His success rate is astonishing. This kid Matt O'Reilly, he's 21. He lit the place up on Saturday. You know, Abada and Jota were terrific. I thought O'Reilly was man of the match. They got him from England. Got him for £1 million. He's 21, and you know it's a steal. They got Abada for 3.5 million. He's 20. He's scoring a ton of goals. Jota they spent money on. Kyogo they spent money on, about 10 million for the pair, but they've repaid it. It's been terrific. You know the signings have been really, really good, and they've been very much Postecoglou signings. Quick players, not just quick physically, but speed of thought. That's what did Rangers in many senses. Celtic were just quicker in every sense. Speed of thought, speed of movement, and then clinical. And they look like a very, very close group. Listen, they have a huge night ahead of them against Real Madrid, but they look a very, very together team.
I suppose, like Tom, I mean, Celtic fans want to enjoy the present, but it's just an obvious follow-on from what you're discussing there. I think there might even have been, speculation about Matt O'Reilly at the end of the window. I mean, look at the pulling power of the Premier League at the moment. It's ridiculous. Even Nottingham Forest, I think, outspending, all the other major leagues in Europe, or like some sort of crazy stats. So, unfortunately, I hear you saying like they've got these young, talented players, and you kind of feel, is the Celtic hierarchy going to be tested in that regard in the next 12 to 18 months, when inevitably there's going to be proper interest in these players from the league that's taken everyone, from bigger clubs than Celtic even?
Completely. And, if Postecoglou and the players do it in the Premiership and the Scottish Cup and the Scottish League Cup, I'm not sure anyone down south with serious money to spend is going to pay that much interest. But if they start doing it in the Champions League, it's a different story. And we're not talking just about O'Reilly and some of the other Celtic players. We're talking about Postecoglou himself. Now, Celtic fans will tell me to shut up at this point because, they don't want anyone talking about their manager moving away. But if he takes Celtic into, if he gets them into the next round of the Champions League, in the top 2, in other words, then everyone's going to pay attention to him. I think people are looking at him already. I'd be surprised if they weren't. They'd be dereliction of duty if they weren't. But I'm sure they're looking at him going, okay, he's rebuilt this team. He's rebuilt it on relatively speaking small money. They're playing terrific football. If he starts to make strides in Europe, of course, people are going to be looking at him, and people are going to be looking at his players. Celtic fans will think, they'll be praying that none of them leave anytime soon, because they all believe that there's something terrific happening here, and I tend to agree with them.
Tom, to ask you about the Blue Half of Glasgow then, like aside from this 4-0 defeat, Giovanni van Bronckhorst has generally set up Rangers quite well away from home. They go away from home to play against Ajax on Wednesday in the Champions League. This is on the back of getting through, a number of knockout games last year to get to the final of the Europa. A couple of penalties go a different way. Rangers could have been lifting a European trophy. They can probably write off last Saturday as a bad day. They've had a couple of bad trips to Parkhead in their last couple of trips now. But this Rangers team are pretty decent going into that game in Amsterdam.
Yeah, I think there's a twin personality in this Rangers team. There's the domestic Rangers who dropped points in 11 league games last season. Now, okay, it's all right dropping points to Celtic, but they drop points to Motherwell and Aberdeen and Hibs and Dundee United. They shouldn't be doing that. 11 games drop points. That's a lot. Plus, they got horsed out of the League Cup by Hibs 3-1. So there's that Rangers, and then there's this other team who turns up in Europe and beats Borussia Dortmund, beats Braga, beats Leipzig, goes all the way to the final, and just loses, as you say, in a penalty shootout against Eintracht Frankfurt. Nothing between the two sides. One penalty missed by Aaron Ramsey. So I'm still figuring out this Rangers team. They lost two stellar players, Calvin Bassey to Ajax, coincidentally, and Joe Aribo to Southampton. Two big players, physical players, great athletes. They missed them for sure. They have brought in a lot of new players. They haven't bedded in so well. Some have, some haven't. Cholak, the striker up front, has been very, very good for them. Tom Lawrence, who was missing in the Old Firm game, and they really could have done with him. He's been good as well. But there's still a jury's out on a few others. Like Van Bronckhorst is under pressure now. The Rangers fans, there's nothing that's going to get Rangers fans irate more than a shoeing in an Old Firm game. They're now talking about the goalkeepers. The goalkeeper good enough. The centre halves. Why haven't they signed better centre halves? The midfield, is it too slow? Is it too ponderous? Out wide, they don't have enough. Ryan Kent doesn't offer enough. Young Tillman is not delivering in the biggest games. Although I think that's a bit harsh. He's only a kid. He looks a decent player. So they're asking all sorts of questions now. And at various times last season, they asked these questions too. But then Rangers went into Europe, turned over a big gun, and everyone think everything's cool. And it was. That run in Europe last season was just extraordinary. And they've done it again this year with knocking PSV out, a very good side. So I'm struggling to figure out Rangers. Would I be surprised if they went to Ajax on Wednesday night and got a result? I wouldn't be. Nothing surprises me about Rangers in Europe. Nothing at all. But there is a split personality about this team.